Hello, welcome to that series of videos about mixing orchestras in live situations. We produced a series of videos concerning the challenges of different productions, from classical productions up to the huge crossover productions. I want to show and share with you my way of working with orchestras in all these different kind of situations. I hope you enjoy. I love to work with operas, and I had the chance to do quite a lot of them. The challenge of the operas is that you separate the orchestra from the stage, whether they're in an orchestra pit or in an extra room, totally somewhere else. Let's first talk about the more easier situation, that is when you have an orchestra pit. In an orchestra pit, the orchestra is sitting in front of the stage, and there is still the naturality between the stage and the orchestra pit, but without the reflection which you normally have in opera houses. Because in opera houses, for example, the wall which separates the orchestra from the audience, it's not a separation between the orchestra and the audience. The main thing about that wall is that it reflects the sound from the orchestra back to the stage, so that the musicians, the singers, can listen to the orchestra. It's an architecture and acoustical phenomenon which is working since a couple of hundred years. But in our artificial world of doing open airs, this is not possible. But that for the monitoring of these, or bringing these words together, it's quite easy. Place some monitor loudspeakers on the edge of the stage and transport the sound to the stage. On the stage itself, you don't have the normal reflections, and sometimes the stages are so huge that there is a need of supply so many points of the stage with the orchestra sound. How do I do that? The whole orchestra I put in a subgroup, and with a subgroup I feed these loudspeakers on stage, or I give the monitors on a matrix where you can add some other signals as well, and they feed the stage. And vice versa, you have to transport the sound of the solo singers back to the conductor's place, which is done just by having the lavalier microphones. When you work with lavaliers on opera, just sum all singers together in a group and feed the monitor loudspeakers of the conductor with it. That's the easier situation. The more difficult situation is when the whole orchestra is in a completely different location, in a completely different room. You have to transmit the whole orchestra via a subgroup to the stage, and the whole stage via a subgroup back to the orchestra. As soon as you have this situation, the problem is that the singers will hear the orchestra only by loudspeakers. What communication do you need? You need video lines. You film the conductor and you give monitors, video monitors for the stage, so that the singers can see the conductor. Most of the time it is wise to have a white wall in the back of the conductor so that they can see him clearly in his black suit. It is mind-blasting how good trained classical singers come along with that situation, because they are trained not only to be controlled by their ears, what they are listening, and they are trained as well to play with that what they see from the conductor. Nevertheless, you have to supply a cloud on stage where you have the whole sound of the orchestra. The sound must not be too loud to interfere with the people sitting in the first row, By the way, of course, in that situation where I don't need near fields in the symphonic concerts, therefore I need near fields because there is no orchestra in that situation there. So we need the near fields for the first rows. Normally in operas I use 3-4 loudspeakers suspended on a height of 2-3 meters on the side of the stage, and 2-3 wedges on the downstage edge of the stage. All these speakers fed by a single group of the orchestra. Then it is post fader, and how I treat the orchestra, it's always replicated on these speakers. So the same sound which is going to the audience is going to these loudspeakers. In the orchestra pit or in the orchestra room, the only one who really has the need of listening to the solo singers is the conductor. If I compare it to the symphonic situation where the monitors are placed in front of the conductor, in that situation I place them behind the conductor. It's unusual for the conductor, but with 1 or 2 loudspeakers, I can adjust the level as well a bit for the musicians in the orchestra room. I don't place a lot of speakers in the room, only these 2. The level is adjusted that way that it's not too high and of course not too low, but there are some occasions when you have arias when single musicians have to play together with the solo singers. And just by placing the loudspeakers behind the conductor, that is enough. Why is it enough? But these situations, you never have a tutti in the orchestra. A tutti means everybody is playing, and forte or fortissimo. These situations occur most of the times in a piano or a pianissimo. You have only 2-3 instruments playing and the singer. And this will give the musician the ability to hear that from the singer he needs. I would like to tell some things about how to microphone the stage of an opera. In an opera, as I already mentioned, the orchestra is somewhere else, so we have the stage for the singers and for the choir. Let's start with the choir. In the choir, I love to suspend microphones. Of course, sometimes there's the need when you don't have a roof or a huge stage. Sometimes there's the need of giving single microphones to the choir singers, which means you use these Sennheisers MKE2 on every cheek of every singer, so you end up with 80 wireless channels only for the choir singers. It's astounding that technical-wise that is possible, but sound-wise it's not my preferred solution, because you have 80 solo singers and not one choir. But how to achieve the sound of getting one choir? It's by suspended microphones. So I use the 185 from Neumann or the 8050 from Sennheiser, and I suspend them. What I want to show you, it is a hypercardioid. Of course you can use the cardioid as well, but how to get this angle like that. The height of the microphone is maybe 3 meters to 3 meters 20 above stage, so pretty low. You have to know that the directivity of the sound from a singer go a little bit downwards, not upwards, and so having microphones which are too high, they don't give you the sound you really need. So that's why 3 meters 20 is a good compromise between not disturbing the optics of the scenery and having a good sound. And that scenery is possible when you consider that you have dancers or artists on stage as well. So there is a need of having an angle for the microphone towards the singer because of the characteristics of this microphone. So therefore you have this small holder, you can attach it to the microphone, and there's a slot for the cable. You can hide the cable here inside and lock it by just turning that, and then it's just held by the cable, and you can adjust the angle of the microphone. Why don't I use omnidirectional microphones? Because I will get comb filter and sounds on the stage on many microphones in the same time on pretty the same level. That's why I use microphones with a directivity. These microphones, I can point them to the rear on the stage, so upstage, and I can delay them to each other. That's why I prefer microphones with a hypercardioid or cardioid directivity. Okay, downstage, so on the edge of the stage. Of course, there are some microphones directly suspended on the front. They give you two disadvantages. The first disadvantage is the optics, the look. The second disadvantage is in the case of rain. You are not fast enough to cover a microphone maybe like that, and it can break down. So then you can place some microphones just on the floor on the downstage edge, and so with just small stands, and therefore, for example, you can use this one, an MKH80 from Sennheiser. You can have it as a hypercardioid or a cardioid, and just place 2, 3 or 4 depending on the stage at the edge of the stage, and you can collect the choir which is in front of the stage. The suspended microphones and the microphones at the edge of the stage, they give you another advantage. In the case that the microphones of the solo singers, which are of course wireless, when they break down due to many reasons, you still have suspended microphones and the microphones at the edge of the stage to cover that area and to have still a pretty good sound of the solo singers, which you can offer to the audience until the solo singer is getting off stage the next time, and you can work on the broken microphone. So it's not a showstopper. And with these suspended mics, there's still the possibility for the show to go on. So let's talk about solo singers in opera. In most cases, solo singers will use this MKE2 from Sennheiser. It's a microphone you can have in different colors, so according to the color of your skin. And this microphone normally is glued to your cheek, or to the cheek of the singer, of course. So, but in which position? I prefer the position which is 1 centimeter behind the edge of the mouth. Why? When I'm too close to the mouth, I have wind noises from the singer. Just, of course, you have wind coming out of the mouth and you will hear that. And as well, the S noises are far too loud. So 1 centimeter behind is a very good position where you get a voice which is pretty equal in level and in the frequencies. There are other positions possible. Sometimes the singers do not like that position, and so another position is you can hide the microphone in the hair of singers, or when they're wearing a hat, just glue it to the hat, and which makes it very easy with makeup, because there is no makeup in the hair, and even in the wardrobe they can leave it the whole time this opera is played, which is good for the microphone, not to glue it every day. Another nice solution is you can glue the microphone to glasses, like that. Just glue it on that position. This position is very clever because you will never have sweat from the singers on the membrane of the microphone. And it's very comfortable, and of course you can't see it It's very hard to find it if you're recording it with a camera or for the audience just to see. So a nice solution as well. I was talking about sweat. When you have a concert in summertime, you have sun on the stage, and the actors are, of course, acting. That's normal. Sweat is a problem. So it can occur that sweat reaches the membrane of the microphone, and suddenly you have a very sound of that microphone. So what to do about that? When you skin it to the cheeks, please put a small plaster below the microphone, which sucks the sweat away from the membrane. Another solution as well is for the important roles, or if you have the budget, for every role, use 2 microphones, 2 wireless systems. So glue 2 microphones together and put them together on the cheeks. So if the main microphone breaks down, you can patch the second microphone to the B input of your console. I hope your console has a B input, a second input per channel. And then you can just switch when it breaks to the other input channel and to the other input of that channel. And so you have the same equalizer, the same dynamic processor. You just swap the physical input of that channel to the second microphone, and you just can go on with all the adjustment as they are. So the solo singers of an opera with attached lavalier microphones to the cheek, they have to be wireless. So what kind of wireless system to choose? We are speaking about singers which have the ability of singing in a huge dynamic range. Very well-trained voices, studied for years, and they are using this dynamic range for their impression. That is a big challenge for wireless systems, and so it is a good choice to go to digital systems, and there especially the System 6000 or 9000 from Sennheiser gives you a big variety. Because what are analog wireless systems doing? They decrease the dynamic range because they have to, and they have a compounder which lower the dynamic range. And this is exactly against that. What you want to transmit. Dynamic is our friend. We want to use a huge range of dynamic, and that's why the System 6000 or 9000, the 9000 can work without any dynamic compression or sound reduction or compression at all, and the 6000, the price-wise a little bit more affordable product, it is working with a very clever codec, which is called the CDAC codec, and the loss is so few, and it gives you such an increase in clarity and in dynamic range compared to other analog systems. There's a last thing I want to mention and to talk about operas, and very often in operas you have stage music or music behind the scenes. And so it is written that in the case of music behind the scenes, it should be as if it is from a far distance. So what to do with that in live sound situations? To be honest, I prefer not to amplify them. Music which should have the characteristic of being far away, place the musicians behind the stage and just let them play, and then automatically they sound as far away. There's only one thing you have to think about. When the orchestra is playing in another room and the conductor is in another room, he has to hear it. And so you have to place a microphone in front of this far orchestra and just an AB system or a single spot microphone to supply the information to the conductor. So place a microphone, don't give the microphone on the PA, just give it on the bus which goes to the conductor. So he can listen to it, he can conduct them, and for the audience it is as the sound is from far away. In the case you have to amplify it, use your suspended microphones from the ceiling. And they are far away, but they can still grab the sound with the characteristics of being far away. It's very important not to change the characteristic of this part of music as the conductor wanted. We already talked about the basics of setting up the console for the orchestra, whether it is in symphonic, opera, or even in musical world. So, but now I want to show you how to feed in an opera the orchestra with the signals from stage and vice versa. It's more or less pretty much easy and not so much to show. So here on the first layer we have all signals from the orchestra. I routed them to a subgroup. So here you can see all signals from the orchestra are routed to the subgroups 1 and 2, a stereo subgroup. I already talked about the basics of setting up a console for orchestras and all the routing, all the deepness in sound, so everything what can be adjusted prior to the soundcheck to make you fast in the soundcheck. So now we're in the opera world and I want to show you how I feed the signals from the stage to the orchestra and from the orchestra to the stage. To be honest, there's not so much to talk about. It's quite simple, but I just wanted to show it to you. So here on the first layer we have the orchestra, and you can see that we have the signals all routed to the buses 1 and 2. Now I switch to the second layer, and there we have the orchestra from stage, wonderful Tosca singing. We have a choir, suspended microphones from the choir. I always try to suspend microphones from the choir. I have the situations where I had to use lavaliers on the choir, but same problem as with the strings. The sound where with the lavalier microphones it does not melt, and with suspended microphones I have a full choir sound. So you see 8 suspended choir microphones. By the way, I leave them open nearly the whole opera because even if it gives the air and the room for the solo singers. Of course the solo singers, they have lavaliers microphone most of the time for the important roles, even 2, just as a backup system. But if all that fails, I still can use the suspended microphones as main microphones, and even if all microphones are failing, I still have this, and the audience can have, at a good quality, still the main singers. So, what do we have here? We have the 8 choir microphones, and we have a few main roles from the Tosca, Caravadossi and Scarpia. And you see here, they are all routed to the groups 3 and 4. I have the groups 1 and 2, which is a stereo group, and the group 3 and 4, which is a stereo group as well. 1 and 2 I call 2 stage, 3 and 4 I call them 2 orchestra. And more or less that's it. The signals from 2 stage is all the orchestra going to the monitors to the stage. You may wonder why I don't do that with an auxiliary as a monitor mix. Because I make the right balance for the orchestra already. And if I use a subgroup, I always have the correct balance. That what the audience hears, I have it in the monitors as well. It's just making my life easier, a very easy way. There's no need of having a rotary in between. And the same I do with the singers which are going to the orchestra. Another thing you might think of is, what about the levels? and the levels are changing. Yes, of course, they are changing. As soon as I make a change in the failures, of course, this will affect that what the conductor is listening. But what I do with the level changes, these level changes are in the way, or they are supposed to be in the way that it is good sounding. So it does not affect. So the conductor always has a good sounding balance in the position where he is. And even if I increase or decrease the level of the solo singers, when do I do that? I increase maybe the level of a solo singer when the orchestra is playing forte. But then the conductor is listening to forte of the orchestra as well. And it's okay when the singer gets louder in the orchestra from the speakers as well. So it helps me. And even other way around, when the solo orchestra is playing pianissimo and I have a singer which is in the same level as always in the orchestra, it will bleed into the microphones. But when the orchestra is playing piano, for the audience, I will decrease the volume of the singer as well. So do I in the orchestra. The bleeding gets less and the conductor still can hear it. In the beginning of the rehearsals for an opera, there's one thing which is very important for me. I need a colleague sitting right next to the conductor with a radio. And I have a radio as well, and he can give me commands what the conductor needs. Of course, we have to adjust these levels in the beginning of the rehearsal. And there's another thing about having a colleague right next to the conductor. It creates trust between the sound engineer and the conductor.